The autumn fashion week was approaching, and my boutique's numbers were diving faster than a model falling off. 6 in heels, I sat in my studio, surrounded by half-finished designs and crumpled sketches, wondering how I'd gotten here. Alexandra Paley, once the rising star of Baton Rouge's fashion scene, now struggling to keep the lights on Miss Bailey, the fabric supplier called again. My assistant poked her head in. They're demanding payment before sending the new shipment. Tell them they'll have it by Friday. I lied, running fingers through my brunette hair. The mirror reflected tired green eyes back at me. I needed an escape, something to clear my head before it all imploded. That's how I found myself on McKay River Trail that Saturday morning. My vintage Schwinn cutting through the crisp Louisiana air. The weather was perfect that rare autumn day when humidity takes a break and lets you breathe. I was pushing hard, trying to outrun my problems, when destiny decided to play its hand. I took the curve too fast. She came from the opposite direction, golden hair streaming behind her like a banner. Time slowed as our bikes did that awkward dance, both trying to dodge the same way, then the opposite way. Oh, was all I managed before. We clipped handlebars and went down in a tangle of spokes and limbs. Are you okay? She was already up, extending a hand. Those blue eyes hit me first, then the concerned smile. I'm Isabel Rogers, Alexandra. I managed, accepting her help, and I'm fine, just bruised pride. Mostly she noticed my vintage cycling jersey. Is that an original 80 seconds? Look, sportif, your vintage fashion. I was impressed. I model, actually, but my real passion is design. She brushed off her pants. There's this little coffee shop around the bend. Let me buy you a cup to apologize for the near-death experience over lattes we discovered. We shared more than just a collision course. Isabel's knowledge of vintage fashion was impressive, and her enthusiasm about sustainable design matched my own philosophy. She talked about her dreams of transitioning from modeling to design, while I found myself opening up about my boutique struggles. She said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, I've been looking for an internship opportunity, someone to learn from hands-on experience. I studied her face, noting how the sunlight through the cafe window caught her features. Just so something stirred in me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. My boutique could use fresh eyes, I heard myself saying. Why don't you come by Monday? We can discuss possibilities. Walking back to our bikes, there was a moment, just a brief one, where our hands brushed accidentally. I felt a jolt that had nothing to do with the earlier crash. As I watched her pedal away, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just veered onto an unexpected path that night. Sketching in my studio, my designs kept featuring flowing golden hair and blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. I told myself it was just artistic inspiration. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. Monday morning brought Isabel through my boutique store's portfolio in hand and wearing a vintage Chanel suit that made my designer heart skip. But she wasn't alone. Sarah Matthews, her best friend and fellow model, trailed behind her with an identical portfolio and an expression that screamed competition. I hope you don't mind, Isabel said those blue eyes, apologetic. When I told Sarah about the internship opportunity, she was interested too. I gestured them both to my office, trying to maintain professional composure despite the unexpected complication. The air felt thick with tension as both women settled into the chairs across from my desk. Sarah, with her perfectly styled red hair and calculating brown eyes, sized up my studio like she was already planning where to put her nameplate. Show me what you've got, I said, reaching for Isabel's portfolio first. Her designs were raw but innovative sketches that merged vintage aesthetics with modern sustainability. Each page revealed something fresh, something that made me lean in closer when she explained her concept for upcycling vintage pieces into contemporary statements. I found myself nodding along, already seeing the possibilities. Sarah's portfolio was technically perfect, safe, the kind of work that would please conservative clients, but wouldn't turn heads on a runway. Still, her industry connections were impressive, and my struggling boutique Could use those. There's one position available, I explained, watching their expressions carefully. I'll need a few days to decide that week. Isabel kept dropping by with new ideas. What if we created a capsule collection using only reclaimed materials? She suggested one evening spreading sketches. Across my workbench, her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself staying late, bouncing ideas back and forth until the streetlights came on outside. Sarah, meanwhile, sent daily emails highlighting her connections and experience. She was the safe choice, the business smart choice, but every time. Isabel leaned over my shoulder to discuss a design. Her perfume, teasing my senses safe, felt increasingly boring. The decision came down Friday morning. I barely slept, weighing professional pragmatism against creative instinct when both women arrived at my office. The tension could have been cut with fabric shears. Isabel, the first, announced the position. Is yours if you want it. The joy that lit up her face made my heart flutter. Sarah's reaction was less pleasant. Are you serious? She snapped, turning to Isabel. You used our friendship to get your foot in the door, didn't you, Sarah? That's not fair. Isabel protested, but Sarah was already storming out, her heels clicking angry Morse cat on the hardwood floors. I should go after her, Isabel said, half rising. I caught her wrist gently. Give her time to cool off. Now about this upcycling concept of yours. She settled back down, but the atmosphere had shifted. Something had broken between the two friends, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow responsible yet. As we spent the afternoon planning our first collection, watching Isabel's eyes sparkle with creativity, I couldn't bring myself to regret my choice that evening. After Isabel left, I found myself sketching her again. The way she gestured when excited, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating. I told myself it was just artistic appreciation, but deep down I knew I was starting down a path that would either save my boutique or complicate everything beyond repair. Probably both. The boutique took on a different energy with Isabel around. Days stretched into nights as we worked on our sustainable collection, the hours blurring together in a haze of creativity and coffee. One evening, while sorting through vintage pieces for upcycling, she caught me staring at her hands as she worked. Penny for your thoughts, she asked, smoothing down a piece of silk. Just admiring your technique, I lied, quickly looking away. The truth was, I've been noticing everything about her lately. The way she hummed while sketching, how her fingers danced across fabrics like she was reading Braille, the slight furrow in her brow when concentrating, she said, settling onto the workroom floor beside me. I haven't heard from Sarah since that day. Her voice carried a weight of sadness that made me want to reach out and comfort her. Sometimes friendships change, I offered, carefully maintaining professional distance. Tell me about your last relationship instead. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Isabel's laugh held a touch of bitterness. 3 years with someone who wanted me to be their trophy. Always the model, never the designer. She paused, running her fingers along a vintage dress seam. What about you? 2 years of putting my career first until she couldn't take it anymore. The pronoun slipped out naturally, and I held my breath watching her reaction, but Isabel just nodded, her eyes soft with understanding their loss. She said quietly, our hands nearly touching among the scattered fabric swatches. Late nights became our norm. One evening, while adjusting a dress on a mannequin, Isabel stumbled slightly. I caught her elbow, and for a moment we were too close. Her perfume, something vintage and French, made my head spin. We stayed frozen for a heartbeat, too long before awkwardly separating. The incident kept replaying in my mind as I sketched later that night. My designs, once precise and calculated, began flowing with curves that mimicked her silhouette. Every piece I drew seemed to be made for her, though I tried to convince myself otherwise. These are different, Isabel remarked the next day, flipping through my sketchbook, more sensual, more alive. Her fingers traced a particularly flowing design, and I watched mesmerized. Sometimes inspiration strikes from unexpected places. I managed, trying to sound professional while my heart performed gymnastics. We worked late again that night, the boutique quiet except for the scratch of pencils and rustle of fabric. I was lost in a sketch when Isabel's voice broke the silence. Alexandra, looking up, I found her closer than expected, examining my drawing over my shoulder. You've captured something beautiful here, she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. I turned slightly, intending to explain the design concept, but the words died in my throat. Her face was inches from mine. Those blue eyes darkened the studio's dim lighting. For a moment, I thought the security alarm's evening reminder beeped loudly, making us both jump. The spell broke, and Isabel stepped back, gathering her things quickly. I should go early morning tomorrow, right? Early morning? I echoed, watching her leave while my heart raced alone in the studio. I stared at the sketch I'd been working on. It was Isabel, of course it was. Isabel draped in one of my designs, but I'd drawn her looking over her shoulder with an expression that matched the one she'd worn moments ago, soft, uncertain, wanting. I tore the page out, intending to crumple it, but instead found myself carefully folding it and slipping it into my desk drawer. This was dangerous territory. I was her mentor, her employer. I needed to keep things professional, but as I gathered my own things to leave, I couldn't stop my fingers from brushing the spot where she'd stood. Couldn't help remembering the way her eyes had lingered on mine before she left. Professional was getting harder by the day. The autumn design retreat couldn't have come at a worse time, or better, depending on how I looked at it. 3 days at a rustic lodge outside Baton Rouge, just as the leaves were turning. I booked it months ago, before Isabel, before everything got complicated. Now staring at the cabin's single queen bed, I wondered if the universe was laughing at me. I can sleep on the couch, Isabel offered, setting down her bag. The cabin's interior was all warm wood and soft lighting, far too intimate for maintaining professional boundaries. Don't be ridiculous, I said, aiming for casual. We're both adults. Famous last words. The first day was productive. We spread our designs across the cabin's wooden table, fine-tuning our collection for the upcoming fashion week. Isabel had brought wine, and as evening settled in, we found ourselves on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades we'd kill to capture in fabric. Why fashion? I asked the winemaking. Me bold, you could have stayed modeling, had an easier life. Isabel swirled her glass thoughtfully, because when I model, I'm wearing someone else's vision, but when I design, she paused, looking at me intently. When I design, I'm finally myself. The autumn air carried a slight chill, and I noticed her shiver without thinking. I draped my cardigan around her shoulders. Our fingers brushed, and neither of us pulled away. Immediately, Alexandra, she said softly, my name sounding different on her lips. In the gathering darkness, the harvest moon hung low and full above us, casting everything in silver light that made her look ethereal. What happened next felt inevitable, like every moment since our bicycle crash had been leading here. 1 minute, we were sitting there, wine glasses forgotten, and the next her lips were on vine soft and tasting of marrow. The kiss was gentle, questioning, until it wasn't. When we finally broke apart, the moon had risen higher in the night. Air had grown cooler. Isabel's eyes were wide, reflecting starlight. I've wanted to do that since that first day in your studio, she confessed. I should have said something professional, something about boundaries and workplace relationships. Instead, I kissed her again. Deeper this time, my fingers tingling in her hair, as years of denying who I was melted away under the autumn sky. We eventually made our way back inside. The air between us charged with possibility. That night, sharing the bed felt like an exquisite torture, both of us hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. Morning brought reality crashing back. I woke to find Isabel already up, dressed and sketching by the window. The professional mask she wore might have fooled anyone else, but I could see the uncertainty in her shoulders. We should talk about last night. I started sitting up. Should we? Her pencil moved faster across the page. We could also not talk about it, pretend it never happened, keep things professional. Her voice cracked slightly. On the last word, I crossed the room, gently taking the sketchbook from her hands. The page was filled with designs, all of them featuring 2 women in various poses. Their faces turned toward each other. Is this what you want? I asked, pointing to the sketches to pretend. She finally looked at me, her blue eyes swimming with conflict. What I want could ruin everything. You've built your boutique, your reputation. My boutique was failing before you came along. I reminded her maybe it's time I stopped worrying about what others think and started being honest about what I want. The tension held for a moment longer before she smiled, small and real. And what do you want? Alexandra Bailey. Instead of answering, I kissed her again, morning breath be damned when we've been separated. She laughed softly. We going to make the rest of this retreat very unproductive. Aren't we? She was right. We did get some work done, but mostly we talked. Really talked about our fears, our dreams, about how this could complicate everything. By the time we packed up to leave, we had no answers, but we had something else, hope. The drive back to Baton Rouge was quiet, both of us lost in thought. The boutique waited ahead, along with reality and all its complications. But as I watched Isabel's sketch in the passenger seat, her face peaceful in the afternoon light, I knew there was no going back to just being designer. And in turn, the question was, where did we go from here? Fashion chapter 5 week approached like an oncoming hurricane, and our boutique was ground zero. The collection we'd created together was unlike anything Baton Rouge had seen before. Sustainable, provocative, walking a razor's edge between vintage revival and modern rebellion. We're taking a risk, I muttered, adjusting a model's vintage Dior jacket that Isabel had brilliantly reconstructed. The storage room buzzed with pre-show tension. Isabel caught my hand, her touch electric. Risk is why we're here, she whispered, so close I could feel her breath. Our eyes locked, and for a moment the world narrowed to just us. 5 minutes to line up, someone shouted, breaking the spell. Sarah Matthews appeared in the doorway, her presence sharp as a knife. She'd been working as a freelance stylist for the show, and the tension between her and Isabel remained thick as Louisiana humidity. Impressive collection, Sarah set her tone. Impossible to read, though. I'm surprised you pulled it off. Isabel, tense beside me, their friendship's breakdown still hung between them like an unresolved chord. I squeezed her hand, reassuringly feeling the delicate bones beneath my fingers. The runway show was a blur of movement, a might. Our models moved like living art, each piece telling a story of transformation. Isabel had designed several looks herself, and watching her vision come to life made my heart race during a quick backstage costume change. I found her pressed against a wall, breathing hard from the show's intensity. Our eyes met, and something primal passed between us. Damn professional boundaries, I thought, leaning closer, but Sarah was watching, always watching. The after party at a historic Baton Rouge mansion felt like a powder keg. Fashion critics, designers, models, everyone who is anyone had turned out. Isabel looked stunning in a reconstructed 952 cocktail dress, her blonde hair swept up, blue eyes sparkling with triumph. Your collection is unconventional, a prominent fashion blogger said, studying our lookbook. Sustainable fashion meets hot couture. Risky, I felt Isabel's hand slide subtly against mine, hidden from view by the crowd. We don't do safe, she murmured, just for me. That's when Sarah made her move. I heard some interesting rumors, she said loudly enough for nearby groups to hear, about certain professional relationships and your boutique. The crowd went silent. Isabel's grip on my hand tightened. Is there a problem? I asked, my voice calm despite the adrenaline racing through me. Sarah's smile was pure poison. Just wondering how close you two have become professionally. Speaking of course, the subtext hung in the air, an accusation, a threat. I watched Isabel's face, saw the moment she decided to stop hiding. Alexandra is my mentor, Isabel said, clearly turning to face Sarah, and the most brilliant designer I've ever worked with. Any other questions? The crowd seemed to hold its breath in that moment. I realized we'd crossed a line. No more hiding, no more pretending. Later that night, back in the boutique, exhausted and exhilarated, Isabel pressed me against the design table. We did it, she whispered, her lips inches from mine. To what exactly? I teased. Survived, succeeded. challenged everything our kiss. Tasted of champagne and victory outside Baton Rouge. Hummed with the night's energy, and inside our little world, everything was possible, but Sarah's threat lingered. A shadow just beyond the light. We'd won this battle. The war I suspected was just beginning. Rumors spread through Baton Rouge fashion circle faster than a summer wildfire. Every whispered conversation seemed to stop when I entered a room, only to resume with increased intensity once I left. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned industry friends, each dancing around the same question: what exactly was happening between me and my intern? The first cancellation came on a Tuesday. Mrs. Henderson, one of my most conservative clients, left a voicemail dripping with Southern passive aggression. Dear, I just don't think you're new. Direction aligns with my values anymore. 3 more cancellations followed that week. Isabel found me in the studio late one night, staring at the numbers. They're leaving because of you, says, softly perching on my desk. They're leaving because they're afraid of change. I corrected, though. We both knew it wasn't that simple. The boutique had been struggling before, but now the whispers were becoming deafening. Sarah's influence was everywhere. She positioned herself as some kind of moral guardian of Baton Rouge, fashion dropping carefully worded comments at society events about traditional values and professional boundaries. The annual charity fashion gala became our breaking point. It was the social event of the season where reputations were made or broken. Isabel and I arrived separately, trying to maintain some semblance of professional distance. The ballroom of the historic hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and old money. I watched Isabel work the room, stunning in one of our designs, a reimagined vintage gown that made her look like a modern Grace Kelly. Every eye followed her, including mine. She's quite something. Sarah appeared beside me, champagne in hand. Such a shame about the rumors. What do you want, Sarah? I kept my voice low, controlled. I want what's best for the industry, for you. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Think about your reputation, Alexandra, your legacy. Before I could respond, Isabel's voice rang out across the room. She was standing on the small stage where the charity auction items were displayed, microphone in hand. My heart stopped. I have something to say, she announced, her voice steady despite the tremor. I could see in her hands. There have been rumors about Alexander Bailey and me. The room fell silent. I started moving toward the stage, but she caught my eye and shook her head slightly. Yes, Alexandra took a chance on me as an intern. She saw potential where others saw just another pretty face. She taught me, challenged me, believed in me. Isabel's voice grew stronger, and yes, I fell in love with her brilliance, her creativity, her courage to break boundaries in fashion and in life. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. If that makes some of you uncomfortable, I understand, but I won't apologize for loving someone who inspires me to be better, to create better, to live more authentically. I reached the stage just as she finished. The silence was deafening. Then, from the back of the room, someone started clapping. It was Marie Laurent, the French designer, known for her avant-garde collections and zero tolerance for prejudice. The applause spread slowly at first, then gained momentum. Not everyone joined, and plenty of shocked faces remained, but enough did to matter. Isabel stepped down from the stage, her eyes never leaving mine. I'm sorry if I just made things worse, she whispered. I took her hand. Right there in front of everyone, you just made them better. Later that night, as we walked through the quiet streets of Baton Rouge, Isabel asked, are you scared, terrified? I admitted, but not of this, not of us. She stopped under a streetlight, pulling me close. Then what of how long it took me to realize that some things are worth more than a safe reputation. The city hummed around us, full of judgment and possibility. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more whispers, more choices, but tonight, under the Louisiana stars, we were just 2 women who'd chosen truth over safety, love over fear, and somehow that felt like the most fashionable choice of all. Coming out in your 30s feels like learning to walk again, wobbly, uncertain, but somehow Liberating after Isabel's declaration at the gala, my phone lit up with messages from my sister in New Orleans. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded when I finally called. I'm still telling myself. I admitted watching Isabel sketch across the studio. She looked up and smiled, that private smile that made my heart skip. The boutique had become our sanctuary, but the real world kept intruding. My mother's weekly calls now carried an awkward pause. Whenever she asked about work, she'd always dreamed of planning my wedding to some nice man, and now she was struggling to reimagine that dream with a woman in the picture. You don't have to come for Thanksgiving, she said. During one call, her voice, careful if you're not ready. I want to, I surprised myself saying, and I'd like to bring Isabel. The silence stretched so long, I thought we'd lost connection. Finally, does she like pan pie? It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was a start. Isabel had her own battles, her parents liberal. Academics from Vermont were theoretically supportive, but practically distant. They loved the idea of diversity. She explained one night as we worked late. Just not when it's their daughter dating her boss, former boss. I corrected, adjusting a hemline. We'd restructured the boutique's hierarchy after the gala, making Isabel a junior partner rather than an intern. It felt right professionally and personally. The holiday invitation arrived on cream colored stationer addressed to both of us. Isabel's family was hosting a Christmas gathering in their Burlington home. We should go, she said, but her voice held a note of anxiety. To Vermont in December. I teased, trying to lighten the mood. This southern girl might freeze. I'll keep you warm, she promised, pulling me close. We ended up working very late that night, though. Very little sewing got done. The midnight design sessions had become our favorite time. One evening, as moonlight spilled through the studio windows, Isabel looked up from her sketches. Do you ever regret it? Coming out so publicly, I considered the question while pinning his sleeve. The past few months had been a roller coaster. Lost clients, balanced against new ones who sought us out specifically because of our authenticity. Strained family relationships, alongside deepening friendships with those who stood by us. I regret not doing it sooner, I finally answered. I spent so many years designing clothes to help other women feel confident in their skin while hiding in mine. She crossed the room and kissed me soft and sure, better late than never. The boutique phone rang, startling us apart. It was my mother calling well past her usual bedtime. I've been thinking, she said without preamble, for Thanksgiving. Does Isabel have any favorite dishes? Besides pecan pie. I caught Isabel's questioning look and mouthed Mom. Her eyes widened. She makes amazing cranberry sauce, I said, watching Isabel's face light up. And she's particular about her stuffing. Well, check, have to show me her recipe then. Mom replied, trying so hard to sound casual. And Alexandra, I'm glad you're happy. After I hung up, Isabel wrapped her arms around me from behind. You're crying, she observed, happy tears. I assured her, turning in her embrace. It's just I never thought I'd get to be this version of myself, the real version. I like this version best. She whispered against my neck. Outside, Baton Rouge was changing seasons, the air growing crisp with autumn's last breath inside. We were creating something new in fabric and fashion, yes, but also in the spaces between who we were told to be and who we really were. Later that night, curled together on the studio's vintage chaise, Isabel murmured, your mother's going to ask when we're getting married, isn't she? Probably. I laughed. Are you ready for that conversation? She propped herself up on one elbow. Studying my face in the dim light. With you, I'm ready for anything. And I believed her, because at 33, I'd finally learned that the best designs in fashion and in life come from being brave enough to be yourself. The email arrived on a sunny Tuesday morning. I was adjusting a hemline while Isabel photographed our latest collection when her phone chimed. The way her breath caught made me look up. Vogue wants me in New York, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not just for a shoot, they're offering a year-long contract plus. Parsons is interested in having me teach some master classes on sustainable fashion. The pen I was holding pricked my finger. A drop of blood welled up bright as a warning sign. That's incredible. I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. It was incredible. It was everything she deserved. It was also my worst fear coming true. The next few days passed in a blur of forest. Normally, we worked on the collection, had dinner with friends, made love in the quiet hours of night, but that email hung between us like a storm cloud, unspoken, but ever present. I haven't answered them yet, she said one evening as we sat in our favorite coffee shop, the same one where we'd had our first real conversation after the bicycle crash. Why not? It's an amazing opportunity. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Isabel reached across the table, taking my hand, because I love what we're building. Here at the boutique, our designs us, and I love you enough to not let you sacrifice your dreams. The words came out before I could stop them. Her blue eyes widened. It was the first time either of us had said those words out loud. Say that again, she whispered. I love you. I repeated stronger this time, which is exactly why I can't let you turn this down. That night in the quiet of our bedroom, we talked until dawn about dreams and sacrifices, about distance and devotion, about how sometimes loving someone means letting them fly. What if, Isabel said, suddenly sitting up in bed, we turn this into an opportunity for both of us? I propped myself up on one elbow, watching her face animate with inspiration. It was the same expression she got when designing something revolutionary. The boutique's online sales have been growing, she continued. What if we opened a second location in New York? The idea took root, growing like spring flowers through concrete. We stayed up all night planning, sketching, dreaming. By morning, we had the beginnings of something that felt less like an ending and more like an evolution. It won't be easy, I cautioned, watching the sunrise paint her skin gold. Starting over in New York, when have we ever done easy? She challenged, pulling me close. The next week was a whirlwind of business plans and property searches. We found a small space in the garment district that needed work store now. It was a statement. A Samba had potential like us. It was ready for transformation. I'll need to be in New York at least 6 months of the year, Isabel said as we reviewed the logistics. But with video calls and regular trips, we could make it work. I finished the thought of part-time separation still hurt, but it was better than the alternative. Sarah, of all people, provided unexpected support. She appeared at the boutique one afternoon looking almost apologetic. I heard about the New York offer, she said, and your plans for expansion. She hesitated, then added, I know some people in real estate. They're good people. They could help Isabel. And I exchanged surprised looks. Why would you help us? I asked Sarah. Shrugged, looking uncomfortable, because I was wrong about you too, about everything, and maybe it's time I did something. Right that evening, as Isabel and I sat surrounded by business plans and design sketches, she asked, are you sure about this? It's a huge risk. I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who had crashed into my life on a bicycle and proceeded to turn everything upside down in the most beautiful way. You know what's riskier? I replied, playing it safe and losing the best thing that's ever happened to me. She kissed me, then soft and sure tasting of possibility and promise outside. Baton Rouge hummed with its usual rhythm, but in our little corner of it, we were planning a revolution, one that would take us from the deep south to the Big Apple, from safe harbors to open seas, and somehow that felt exactly right. Spring bloomed in Baton Rouge as we launched our inclusive fashion line, Seams Without Boundaries. The boutique's windows showcased designs that blended Southern charm with metropolitan edge, each piece telling a story of transformation. It's not just clothes, Isabel explained to Vogue's reporter during our first major interview. It's about creating space for everyone to be themselves. She caught my eye across the room, and I felt that familiar flutter in my chest. The article, when it came out, was everything we'd hoped for. Bailey Rogers Designs Redefined Southern Fashion, read the headline underneath. Was a photo of us in the boutique, Isabel adjusting a dress on a model. Wow. I watched with undisguised admiration. The caption noted we were partners in both business and life. Orders flooded in from across the country. Our online store crashed twice from the traffic, but the real surprise came from an unexpected source. Sarah appeared one morning clutching coffee and looking Nervous, I have a proposition, she said, setting 3 cups on my desk. I've been thinking about what you're doing here, about including inclusion and authenticity. She pulled out a portfolio, not the safe commercial one from before, but something new. Bold designs that challenge gender norms while maintaining classical elements. I was afraid, she admitted, watching our faces as we flipped through the pages, of being different, of standing out. But you two showed me that being yourself is the only way to create something meaningful. Isabel reached for Sarah's hand, bridging years of hurt with a simple touch. These are incredible, and just like that, our duo became a trio. Sarah's industry connections combined with her newfound authentic voice added another dimension to our brand. The fashion world took notice. Our first major show as a united front happened during New Orleans Fashion Week. The collection celebrated diversity in all its forms, age, size, gender, everything, as the models walked the runway. I watched the audience's faces transform from skepticism to wonder. This is what fashion should be, Tim Gunn said afterward, embracing each of us personal, political, powerful. The after party felt like a dream. Isabel wore one of Sarah's designs, while Sarah wore one of mine, and I wore one of Isabel's, a physical representation of our intertwined creative spirits. Remember when I thought you stole my internship? Sarah laughed, champagne making her cheeks flush. Gosh, I was such a pain in the ass, Isabel suggested, grinning. I was going to say full cool, but that works too, as they laughed together. I marveled at how life could surprise you, how enemies could become allies, how fear could transform into courage, how love could expand to include the unexpected. Later that night, in our hotel room overlooking the French Quarter, Isabel traced patterns on my skin. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't crashed our bikes that day? I'd probably still be designing safe, boring clothes and pretending to be someone I'm not, I admitted. She propped herself up on one elbow. You were never boring, Alexander Bailey. You just needed someone to crash into your carefully ordered world. The next morning, we had breakfast with Sarah in the hotel's courtyard as we discussed upcoming collections and expansion plans. I noticed how comfortable it all felt, the three of us, once trapped in our own fears, now creating something revolutionary together. We should do a Pride collection, Sarah suggested, surprising us both, but not just rainbow. Everything, something subtle, powerful, something that speaks to everyone who's ever felt different. Isabel's eyes lit up with inspiration. What if we incorporated vintage elements? Like taking traditionally masculine or feminine pieces and completely reimagining them. I watched them bounce ideas back and forth, these two women who had once been bitter rivals, now creative partners. The morning sun caught Isabel's hair, turning it to gold, and I felt that familiar surge of love and gratitude. Earth to Alexandra's. Isabel teased, catching me staring. Where did you go just now? Nowhere, I smiled. I'm exactly where I need to be, and we all were three women who had found our truth in fashion and friendship and the courage to be ourselves. The boutique was more than estuary, a revolution in silk and steel. As we walked back to the hotel, arm in arm, New Orleans jazz floating through the air, I realized something. Sometimes the best designs come from the pieces you never expected to fit together. The transformation of my little boutique into Baton Rouge's most talked about fashion house happened so gradually, and yet all at once. One morning I walked in to find a line of people waiting outside, some having traveled from neighboring states just to shop our collection. Did you see the write-up in Elle? Isabel asked, sliding her arms around my waist from behind. They called us the revolutionary voice of Southern fashion. The article was framed on our wall alongside other from Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Women's Wear Daily. Each one celebrated not just our designs, but what we represented: authenticity, inclusion, love in all its forms. Sarah had become our unexpected champion, using her connections to organize Baton Rouge's first inclusive Fashion Week. We're calling it Fashion Without Borders, she announced during our planning meeting, and every major designer in the South once in the event took over downtown Rainbow flags flew alongside traditional Southern decorations, creating a visual metaphor for our mission models of all sizes, ages, and backgrounds. Walked pop-up runways in the historic district, local businesses transformed into temporary showrooms. "You've changed the city," my mother said one evening, surprising me. She'd stopped by to drop off dinner and found Isabel and me slow dancing among the mannequins after hours. Instead of leaving embarrassed, she'd smiled and joined us for a glass of wine the night before the Fashion Week's opening. Isabel disappeared for hours. Emergency meeting was all she'd say, leaving me to handle the final preparations with Sarah. "You know what she's up to, don't you?" I accused Sarah, who just smiled. Mysteriously, that evening, Isabel texted me to meet her on the boutique's rooftop. I climbed the stairs to find it transformed. Hundreds of tiny lights twinkled overhead, creating a starlit effect. Vintage dress forms wore some of our most iconic pieces, creating an intimate runway. "What's all this?" I asked, finding Isabel in a dress I designed specifically for her, midnight blue silk that made her eyes look like sapphires. "This is where it all started," she said, taking my hands. "Well, technically, it started with a bicycle crash, but this rooftop is where we first stayed up all night designing together, where you first kissed me, where we dreamed up our future." My heart started racing as she led me to a small table set for two. Isabel let me finish. She smiled, her hands trembling slightly. "Alexandra Bailey, you didn't just give me a chance as a designer. You showed me it was possible to be completely authentically myself, to create without fear, to love without hesitation." She dropped to one knee and I forgot how to breathe. "I had this whole speech planned," she laughed, nervously pulling out a vintage ring box about how fashion is like love. "It should be bold, authentic, transformative, but really, it comes down to this. I want to design the rest of my life with you." Tears blurred my vision as she opened the box, revealing a stunning Art Deco ring. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes." Cheers erupted. From below, looking over the rooftop edge, I saw our friends, family, and team gathered in the street. Sarah stood front and center, champagne already popping. "You all knew?" I called down, "Honey." My mother's voice rang out. We helped plan it later that night after the impromptu celebration had moved inside. I found Isabel at our studio. She was sketching what looked suspiciously like wedding dresses, already planning the big day. I teased, "Just thinking about how far we've come," she said, pulling me close from hiding who we were to celebrating it on a rooftop. "Speaking of celebrations," I said, "we still have a fashion week to launch tomorrow." She kissed me softly, then "We better get some sleep." But we didn't sleep much that night. Instead, we stayed up designing, dreaming, and loving, just like we had that first night on the rooftop outside Baton Rouge. Hummed with anticipation for tomorrow's fashion week. Inside, we were already creating our next masterpiece, a life together and somewhere in the city. Sarah was probably already planning the most fabulous wedding the South had ever seen. Our wedding was everything a fashion designer ceremony should be, and nothing like what anyone expected. We held it in the boutique, transforming the space into a vintage wonderland. Each mannequin told part of our story through clothing, the cycling outfit from our first meeting, the dress from our first kiss, the rooftop proposal. "Ensemble, you two are impossible." Sarah laughed, adjusting my veil. Who else would turn their wedding into a fashion exhibition? We designed our own dresses, of course. Isabel's was a modern take on a 1950s silhouette, all clean lines and flowing movement. Mine incorporated vintage lace from my grandmother's dress, reimagined into something boldly contemporary. Both designs would later become the cornerstone of our first bridal collection. "Something borrowed," my mother said, pinning her antique pearl brooch to my dress. Her eyes glistened. "I never imagined this day quite like this, but gosh, it's perfect." The ceremony itself was intimate, just family and close friends. Tim Gunn, who'd become a mentor and friend, officiated fashion like love. He began as about transformation, about taking something ordinary and making it extraordinary through vision, courage, and dedication. Isabel's vows made everyone laugh and cry. In equal measure, I promise to always crash into your life with the same enthusiasm as that first bicycle accident, she said, squeezing my hands to design each day with you, to face every challenge with creativity and love, and to never stop surprising. You mine were simpler. You made me brave enough to be myself. I promise to spend the rest of our lives returning that gift. The reception was pure. New Orleans meets high fashion jazz filled the streets as we turned the whole block into a celebration. Models were our designs mixing with guests in a living fashion. Show even the cake was a sculptural masterpiece inspired by our most iconic pieces to the women who revolutionized Southern fashion. Sarah toasted her voice, carrying over the crowd, and showed us all that love is always in style later. As we danced under the stars on our rooftop, Isabel whispered, ready for our next adventure. The boutique was expanding with our New York location opening next month. Our inclusive fashion line had sparked a movement with retailers nationwide, clamoring to carry our designs, but looking into her eyes, I knew she meant something more personal always. I answered, pulling her closer. A year later, we stood in our expanded boutique, now a full fashion house. The wall of our main showroom displayed our journey. Magazine covers, wedding photos, and our most meaningful designs, but the centerpiece was a simple bicycle wheel mounted like art. Should we tell them the real story? Isabel asked. As a group of fashion students toured the space, they were part of our mentorship program, young designers who didn't fit the traditional mold about how the most successful fashion house in the South started with a bicycle crash. I laughed. They'd never believe it, but we did tell them, just as we told every new intern and designer who joined our team, because our story wasn't just about fashion or love. It was about having the courage to be yourself, to crash into life head first, to create something beautiful from the unexpected. That evening, after everyone had left, Isabel and I sat in our studio sketching our next collection. Sarah's voice echoed from her office as she planned our upcoming Paris show outside the Louisiana sunset. Painted the sky in colors we try to capture in fabric. Any regrets? Isabel asked, looking up from her designs. I thought about the past 2 years, the risks, the challenges, the moments of doubt. Then I looked at her, still as beautiful as that first day on the bike trail, still making my heart race with a single smile. Just one, I said seriously. I should have crashed into you sooner, she laughed, pulling me into a kiss that tasted of forever. Around us, the boutique hummed with possibility, with dreams yet to be designed, with love that had transformed not just us, but an entire community. And somewhere in Baton Rouge, 2 more people were probably crashing into each other, starting their own story of unexpected love and transformation. But that's another design for another day.